All right, we're back, and it's and my mustache died. It's Comp 397. It's week 9, lesson 9, part 2, and we're broadcasting live on YouTube. You should be able to see it on YouTube, right? And we're also broadcasting live on I guess Google Hangouts if you're into the Hangouts thing, right? So if you want to see that, we just talked about our final presentation, and we talked about our final project, and now we're going to get work into doing something with Visual Studio, because I think that's where we want to get to, right? Hopefully, like I said earlier, most of you have already started your final project, or your assignment 3, and you're almost done. That's how it should be right now. I know there's going to be some people, for whatever reason, that are going to do it this week, right? And for the last day, they're going to rush till the end, and then they're going to try and get it done by Friday because they think they're superstars, and it's going to be like that. I guarantee you that this will be, it'll work out to your detriment at some point. All right, let's take a look at GitHub. I want to go on GitHub and take a look at the stuff we've got on GitHub for us right now, because we've been doing this demo on GitHub, right? And if you notice, I still got some piece parts I got to share with you, just so that way we're close, right? So we've been working on this COMP397 mail pilot, and last time we got together was a couple weeks ago, because we've been on break last week, right? There was the reading week. So we got to the point where our mail pilot for 397 was working. We had some collisions. We had a scoring system. I think we got to that point. The one thing that we couldn't get done was we couldn't do this this idea of this finite state machine. So I want to kind of bring that up, and you know what? There's a couple ways I can probably do this. Let me see if I can do this with just going into my files and finding my little thing on. I want to make sure that I've got things proper. COMP397 mail pilot. Of course, when I want to look at my COMP397 mail pilot, she'd be gone for some reason or another. But that's okay, right? The great thing about GitHub is, like in my case, I had a bit of, I had some stuff that happened that basically killed some of my archive, and because I use GitHub, I'm able to save myself some time and misery. Instead of starting over, I can certainly just download the stuff from GitHub again, which is what I'm going to do, right? So this is what you would do too if you were forking me on GitHub, or if you were checking stuff out. So here's my COMP397 mail pilot. Here's an example of what I do on GitHub. Download zip. I can also clone in desktop, right? Let's just download the zip file in this particular case. It's downloaded. And if I go to my downloads, as an example, I've got my master COMP397 mail pilot master. I'm going to expand it and extract it here. And now that I have it, I have a couple of layers that I got to go into before I get to this, right? So really all I need is this. I'm going to rename this thing for a second. And I'm going to drag and drop this into my files, my site files, because I think it's important that I do that. So actually, first of all, I'll just run off another version of File Explorer. And to get to that point where I look in my sandbox, which is where I want my COMP397 mail pilot to appear. There we go. Okay, cool. Without catastrophic failure, thank God. Okay, so here's my mail pilot, and I'm going to double click now, and it should run pretty much the way I have it. It's my code. And let's see how it goes. Okay, so here's my Solution Explorer. And last time, just to kind of bring up to speed with what we did, and hopefully this will all work, I did this. Right? I'm going to build the game. And when I die, I go into -1. Well, that's bad. -1 is probably a negative for us, right? We don't want to do it so that you go into a negative state. We want to be able to do it so that when we hit -1, the game is over, right? Now we also have to think about this. If I'm going to do a finite state machine, and what that is the ability for me to switch from one screen to another screen. This is the big challenge for assignment number 3, and understanding what we do. Now I have an example of this, if you want to take a look, on my MailPilot online, right? So it's like, let's say for example, you've been working on assignment 3, and you worked on a MailPilot that I gave you, because I have an online version of it that you can base it off of. Let's just take a look at this. I go to GitHub, and I want to look at MailPilot. So let's look at all my files again, right? And I want to look at, I want to search for MailPilot in my repositories. Here it is. Here's COMP397 MailPilot, but I also have something just called MailPilot, right? And MailPilot version 11 is the one you should be working off of, right? This is the one that you and I are using as a basis, right? So if I go in there and take a look at what I've got as a as my finite state machine to see what I'm doing, if I go into my scripts, and if I go into my game.ts file, I notice immediately that I have a structure that looks like some kind of switch statement, right? And what I'm doing is I'm actually switching, and this is the deal with this finite state machine idea. I'm switching between this menu state to a play state, finally to a game over state. Those are the 3 states you're getting. You have to do one more on your own, the instruction state for assignment number 3, right? Somehow, or present your instructions somewhere else. Somehow you're going to do that. You don't have to do a state for the instructions, but this is the way it works. So how does this thing look anyway, if I was going to plot this out? And I think we did this kind of example last week with Sonia. Last week we were together. I said, Sonia, you know, how would you do it if you had a game? Unfortunately, she's not here today. But let's take a look and see what this thing would look like. So if I bring up my screen, so I'm going to go just to here so we can explain it, because part of this is conceptualizing what I'm talking about here, right? So let's go 640 by 480, and here's my game screen, let's say, and this is my first screen. This is the game that I play, right? So this is my screen. Let's say I'm going to make the same idea. So there's my game screen, and this is my game start screen. So I'm just going to label this thing game start. Let's make it so it's, I don't know, some kind of gray background for a second. That's too dark. A lighter gray background. And I'm going to just label this game or menu, the menu state. So this is our menu state, right? So our menu state, actually it's good that it's white. Our menu state here is the state that we start off of, right? We start off with the menu saying, do you want to play the game? Like most times, right? So we'll just make this a group. So I can just copy this thing over and over again. So this is our menu state. And in our menu state, what we want to say is, okay, from there, where do our arrows go? The next state should be the game play state, right? So you have your menu, say play the game or go to instructions, right? So let's just copy this and paste it. And here's instead of my menu state now, we want to go into, this is my play state, call it like that. So there's my play state, okay? My play state is the game where we actually play the game. Now this is when we do level, assignment number 3. You did the same thing. You have really these 3 states with assignment number 3, right? Menu state, play state, and you have a game over state. Let's just do that too, right? And here we go. Here's the game over state, right? Game over, and of course it's not going to work. We're going to have to go to the next line. Game over state, right? So our game over state is going to be after the play state, obviously. So let's talk about these arrows, like I said before. So you're going to have a line that basically goes from your menu, right? Your menu is going to go to your play state, right? So this is one thing that you're going to be able to do, right? And then from your play state, after you're done, you're going to be able to go to your game over state, right? Well, you know what? Your game over state should have a play again button that takes you back, right, to your play state. So you can play this again. So if you notice, there's a bit of a loop here. This can go on forever. If the person wants to keep playing the game over and over again, they can do that, right? Now, we didn't talk about our, well, I'm going to move this over a little bit. So we didn't talk about our instruction state, and we really don't, like I said, we don't have to have an instruction state typically. Let's see if I can do this like that. Yeah. And let's make our instruction state over here, right? And I will ungroup this one too, right? There we go. And let's just call this instruction state. I didn't ask you to do this. I said just make an instruction screen. There's got to be instructions for the game, right? Now I'm recommending an instruction state. If you can do these, then an instruction state is nothing. And we'll talk about that in a second, how we do these things, right? So the instruction state then should allow you to do a couple things, right? It should allow you to go from your menu state over to your instruction state, right? And then when you're done reading the instructions, it should either take you back, right, as an option, or get you right into playing the game, right? Because that's kind of, most games do that kind of thing. So there's some options here. How do you make things work like this, right? Now, in your final project, because we just talked about final project today, your play state, you may have several play states. Play state level 1, level 2, or easy, medium, hard, whatever. It's the same concept. Once you have one play state and you encapsulate the game into one play state, you should be able to do several play states from there, right? So the challenge is, how do we encapsulate the game first? How do I make it so that the game plays as its own little entity? And if I launch, you know, my game again, right, the second version of my next level, I can still launch my next level, and it's not going to stop things from playing. It's not going to interfere with the other levels. One level is almost like a whole world of its own, if you will. Each screen that you see in an app, if you download, if you're an Apple person and you're an iOS, you have some kind of iPhone or something, and you download an app from the App Store, these states, right, if you will, right, these screens, call them what you like, right, are exactly the same thing. This is a view controller. You're making a new view, if you will, right? Each of these views have their own logic behind them. All you're doing is switching. You're saying, move this view into the viewable area so the player can interact with it. Okay, when you're done with the menu state, okay, now move this view. Get rid of this view. We don't have a menu state anymore. And then I'll start playing the play state again. But there's always something controlling all these things, and that's the backend game.ts file, right, which controls the flow between one state and another. Okay, because we're going to move from one screen to another screen. And we have to have those controls in place. How do I do that? Okay, well, if I go back to my, if I go to the code here to give you an example, right? So here's my init function as an example. I've got my a function that's a game loop, and if you notice, my game loop is pretty small now. It's just, here's my current state function, whatever that is, and then here's my change state. And my change state function, what it does is it says, okay, well, when my state changes, move from start playing this new game, change my current state function to whatever my menu state is or whatever, and my states menu, right? States.menu, right? And I'm going to have a states.play. So I'm going to have to make a states folder, right? I'm going to make a states folder with several different states. One of the states is going to be this play state we've been developing over the little while, okay? Couple things to note about play states. If I go back to my code here, right? And if I look at my current code, the current build we have for COMP397 MailPilot demo, right? If you look at it carefully, I don't have a states folder in my scripts. I have my scripts. Underneath that, I have my managers, my objects, my typings. And when I look at my game.ts file here, right now, when I'm using TypeScript, there's a couple things we need to do to prepare for this, you know, this journey we're going to be on with a state machine. One of the journeys we have to take is we have to make sure that we take this asset stuff and put it into its own, and create a new manager, an asset manager, because our assets are going to be used across all the different game levels, not just one game level, right? So we have to make it so that it's something that we can access as its own module. That's one thing. So that's the first thing we have to do from a planning perspective. When we move our game from here's our game to I need to make this work. You know, that's one thing I need to make. I need to make a new manager. Like right now we have a collision manager, right, that we use for all types of collisions that we can access. We're going to do the same thing for this asset manager. That's one. The second thing I see here that we haven't had a chance to do is move all these assets, like we did before, into a sprite sheet, right? Because I think that's important for us to do, right? As opposed to how it's working right now with, you know, ocean, plane, island, cloud, all this stuff separate. And we have a bunch of these sound files as well. So I need to do a couple of some prep work. The other thing is that if you notice down here, one more thing is you notice that I'm always adding things to the stage. This is bad because that means that every time I add my stuff to the stage, if I was going to do cleanup between levels, right? So I have a level 1, my play state, and I want to, use my play state to move from one level to the other, right? Right now everything's going to the main stage. The stage is a global object that we use, right? Well, that's great, but that means I have to remove every object from the stage and then show the new stuff on the stage, right? Nah, that's bad. That's really bad. That's a lot of cleanup. It's better if I use a global game container, right? That's what I would use, and the game container contains my game, right? And if I kill the container, it kills everything inside there. I don't have to go and manage each of the individual objects on their own. That's kind of a better thing. From a memory management perspective, it's better as well, right? So that's where I want to go. So there's a bunch of little changes I have to make, and we have to decide where to start first. So Ali, you've been my partner in crime today because you put us on broadcasting live. Where do you want me to start? Do you want me to fix my assets first, or do you want me to change my to use the game container, my global game container? What would you like to see?
Assets first.
Assets first. Okay, we're going to do the assets first trick. Okay, that's how we do this. Okay, so we kind of did this last time. We have these. Our game has these assets right now. We have audio. We have some. We haven't touched fonts yet. We probably will do that. I have my cloud, my island, my ocean, my plane. I want to create this texture map that I want to use, right? And I want to make each of these assets, as an example, work as a sprite as opposed to a bitmap. And because if you notice our objects here, we have a couple things. We have cloud. If I look at the cloud, that is it's a game object. This is good, actually. I prepared a lot already. And if I go to my game object is actually a bitmap. Bitmap is good when we use a sprite sheet. We need to make our game object a sprite. That's the most important piece. So we have to convert. We have to move away from bitmap. They do things a little bit differently on the bitmap side, and we got to use sprites in our sprite sheet. Okay, so that's the one thing we need to take care of here. But we need to do some prep. And in order for us to do that, we need to go to Texture Packer. Remember I talked about Texture Packer as the way to do this, and pack up our cloud, island, and ocean, our cloud, island, and plane, and leave out the ocean. And the reason why we're leaving out the ocean is it's really long and big, and it's going to actually make it so that our sprite sheet is actually too big, right? So we don't want to do that. We want to kind of leave that as a bitmap. That's probably the only one I'll use as a bitmap and load that separately. Okay? So let's do that. So the first thing I need to do is kind of create I'm going to make a folder in my downloads so we can do this, just to share this. Actually, I do have my folder already. It's a zip file. And I have this other one that I've copied, I'm sure, called this, COMP397. So I actually have everything. My assets here is right here. And you guys kind of do the same thing. Now, there's many ways to do this. You don't have to use Texture Packer, but I highly recommend it because it's very easy to use, right? Okay, so we're going to save this thing just because, maybe we're going to get back to this later on. We're going to kind of look at that one more time. And I'm going to call this state machine. All right. So I want to use Texture Packer. How do I use it? Right. Well, again, I've downloaded and installed Texture Packer. It's the way I do things. I highly recommend it again because it makes life easy for us when we do sprite sheets. And actually, Texture Packer is really cool if you're using CSS. If you're a web programmer and you want to use a sprite sheet, you can do that. It actually has a lot of outputs, not just for games, but for other uses as well. And again, it's about $50 in that range. I don't know if it's 50 US, but it's and we don't have really a textbook that I'm asking you to get for this course. So again, I would recommend if you're going to spend your money, spend it on Texture Packer. Okay, so here's Easel.js. This is the output that I'm using, and I'm going to create a project. Okay, so here's my new project. As an example, if you notice, how do I use this thing again? Remember, it's a drag and drop environment. So it says drag and drop sprites or folders here, right? Okay. I'm not going to drag and drop the folders, but I'll drag and drop the sprites. I'm going to go into downloads. I'm just using the Mac version, but the other version for Windows, and I think it's even available on Linux, is very similar to this. So I'm going to go to Assets. Here's my images. I can't do audio right now. It won't pack audio sprites, but one day they will. I'm going to drag and drop my cloud, and I'm going to put my island, and I'm going to drag and drop my plane, not my ocean though. So these are my 3 sprites I'm using, right, that I'm going to make sprites of, and they're all kind of packed them into one sheet, right? That's what this first phase is, right? Okay, so this is cool. These are my cloud, island, and ocean, and if you notice, it's the maximum size is 2048 by 2048. I can choose to make it a special size, like for example, I can make it so I can force it to be square, exactly, so it's easier for it to be read. That's fine. I can also make it so that I can force it to be word aligned, right? So that textures make sure that each row in the texture uses a complete memory words. I don't want to do that. It's not necessary for me to do that. There's a lot of other options. I can change the scale of these things, make them bigger or smaller, right? For my textures, right? So that I can save memory and so on. But for now, I'm just going to keep the standard settings, and I'm going to publish my sprite sheet, right? So publish my sprite sheet. It's going to say, well, okay, well, where does this JSON file? Because remember, there's 2 outputs from Texture Packer. One of them is a PNG file, a PNG file, that contains all my bitmaps together in one file, right? And the other one is a JSON file that describes where on the sprite sheet my bitmaps lie, like in X and Y coordinates, width and height, right? So those are the 2 things that Texture Packer does. So I want to be able to use this thing, this slot machine. Now this is slot machine project. That's not really what it is. That was just a leftover from last time. So I want to go to downloads because I already have kind of a little asset here for MailPilot. I'm going to go into my assets. I'm going to go into my images, and this is where I want to put my my JSON file. I'm going to call this MailPilot. MailPilot.json, right? And save. Okay, cool. And that didn't do what I wanted to do because it didn't ask me for my other one. We got to be careful what it does here. It says here MailPilot.ping. It went into assets, and MailPilot.json went also into assets. This is good, and it did both. It says it looks like it's okay, right? That's new. And if I look down here in my folder, I have these 2 things: a MailPilot.json file and a MailPilot.ping file. Let's take a look and see what this JSON file looks like, right? Like we did last time. Well, it's pretty simple now, right? We don't have as many things. I don't need this Texture Packer piece here. I'm just going to get rid of this and the comma, right? Remember, this is just regular JSON. Who does not know what JSON is? JavaScript object notation. That's what it means. So what it is you've got these curly braces here and here that define this object. This is a big object, right? You have a property called images, right? Which is where our object is, MailPilot.ping, right? And the other one is, I called it MailPilot.ping. I'm going to rename this thing to Atlas. Probably should have done that. And then I have a few frames. Another property is I have an array. Remember, the square brackets is an array of arrays. That's what I have. An array of arrays. One of them is each of the frames. This is the position. So 2, 2, right? X and Y, right? And then I've got this other stuff here that's basically showing me our width and height and some other offsets. Okay, that's what this is. And the same thing goes for this other stuff. X and Y coordinates for my object that's on my sprite sheet, plus a width and a height. Okay, and the same thing goes for my last one. So if you notice, my plane, X and Y, and then width and height. Right? That's how kind of it works for my plane. So I got my cloud, island, and plane, and they're all on one ping image. Okay, cool. And this is the first time I've got the latest version of Texture Packer. This is the first time I've seen this additional offset data, which is totally useful. You can totally use this thing, and it helps with Easel.js. All right, so cool. I'm going to save this thing. Okay, I've done that now. Close. And you know what? Just to be where I want to go, I want to rename this MailPilot.ping. I should probably have called it Atlas. And same thing goes with my MailPilot.ping. I'm going to call this Atlas, just to make it so it's different. And that means that in my JSON file, I forgot. In my JSON file, I'm just prepping it right now. You'll see what I'm going to do in a second. I need to probably make sure that it's also Atlas. right? Because this is just where the image is, right? Atlas. A few different things, but the majority of it is all done for me, right? So I mean, I don't have to work so hard. Okay, cool. So I've done all that. My texture packer stuff is done. I might as well save this project because I might add to it. I might subtract from it, whatever. All right, so my file, save project, and it's asking me, hey, what do I want to save as, and where do I want to save this thing anyway? I'm going to go to downloads. I'm going to go to here and where I'm putting everything in right now. And inside here, my assets, might as well put it under images and just call this mail. That I'll call mail pilot for sure. And that's just my asset. Okay, cool, for my project. So I can close this texture packer down now, and it's not going to hurt me. Let's go back over here now. Now on the Windows side, I have an atlas.json and atlas.ping file, and I can certainly drag and drop like I normally do both of these files into my images, right? So that's the first step. So drag and drop these files into images. Right, there we go. And I got my atlas.json. I put it in there so that way I have it. Future iterations of code could access the JSON file without actually including it in my code. For our purposes, I'm going to actually physically include the atlas.json file in my code by copying and pasting. So I'm going to just double click. There's my JSON file like we had before. A couple changes I need to make this. This is my folder structure, right? So I want to go, if you notice in my game.ts, it's assets, images, and then the name of the image, right? That's my path. So I got to do the same thing for this thing. So I got to say, you know, assets, images. That's one thing I forgot. And then the name of my file, atlas.ping, right? So I'm going to save this just to keep it the same, and then copy this whole thing. So copy this whole thing. All right, and then go to my game.ts file, and I'm going to include this, right, as some data, right? So example, it's my atlas that I'm going to be using. Instead of a manifest, I'm going to have my atlas. And for you to know what I'm doing, how I'm coming up with that, if we go to easel.js, and if I go to my documentation for easel.js, which is here, and if I look at sprite sheets, right? Because this is what I'm trying to do here, right? Here's my sprite sheet. I've got a couple of things here. I need my path to the image. That's where my image is. Here's my frames, and this is these extra pieces that Texture Packer gives me now. It gives me my width and my height. You know, as an example, a count, my regex and reg-y values, my spacing, and my margin. I could put that in there, right? So would look like that as well. Width and height, and regex and reg-y. And then I have, if I have animations or not, I can have, you know, I can define my animations. Run animations, I can talk about frame 0, right? And then frame 8 would be my final animation. So from frame 0 to frame 8, that's how it would work. My jump animation, if I was going to do an animation, and so on. And finally, you need something like this as an example, right? Where I have my data, hey, look, this looks exactly like what I'm getting from Texture Packer. Right? Because I don't have to write any of this myself. It's done, right? It's done. So this is kind of cool. So there's my sprites and so on. And you know what? I'm going to take this information, this sprite information here, the same structure, and use it. I'm going to call it data, right? Okay, let's go back to my files to see this done. So we're going to make a global variable here for a second for LE. I'm going to say var data, right? And again, there's different ways we can call this different things. Let's just call it data for now, just to match the example. Equals to, and then we're going to paste in our stuff, right? This is the stuff that we got from our atlas.json. We got from Texture Packer, right? And assets, we've got the information, you know, as an example, and this is what it looks like, right? Okay. All right, and if we go back, if I wanted to look at that API documentation here, I got most of the things that I've got in here. Their width and our height is really all we need, but I'm actually giving you more data because there's more information. We need this other piece. We need a sprite sheet, right? We have to define a sprite sheet. We're not going to call it sprite sheet though, right? That doesn't make any sense. We could, but we need to call it something like, hey, this is my sprite sheet that I'm using. I need to do a new Create.js sprite sheet that I'm going to pass in the data into, right? That's the one thing I need to do. And then, right, when I actually access it, I'm going to access my run. You know, that's the run animation, because this is the run animation. I've named it run, and it's going to run from frame 1 to frame 5, as an example. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. For a complete example of this, if you guys are having trouble finding all this stuff out, go to my Mailpilot version 11, right? That's on GitHub for you guys to see it. And if I go out one, and if I go into managers, and if I go into the asset.ts, the asset manager, you'll see that I've done this. I've got a manifest, I've got my sprite sheet data, that's what I'm calling it instead of just data, and I've got my information about the plane and everything else, my atlas, right? There's a couple of other sprites I've included here, and you'll see we're going to add to it because I've got some buttons that I'm going to add in later on. That's why I saved it. So I've got my cloud, my instructions button, my island, right? My cloud, my instructions button, my island. This is my island, right? 62 by 63. My plane, which is, and somehow it's coming in at 65 and 65 this time around. And my play button and my try again button. Those are the things that I'm getting. And then once I have my data, right, as a complete example, when I have my class, I'm going to create a new loader, right? And one of them is I'm going to make a new atlas, is a new sprite sheet that I'm passing in my sprite sheet data to. So this is my sprite sheet data, which comes from over here. I'm doing the exact same thing here. This is the example that I'm going to be using. Okay. The other thing is that when I actually access my assets, right? If just to get what it looks like, here's my plane. Here's my plane.ts file, right? And if you notice my plane.ts file, it's class plane. And when I have, in this particular example, I have an image, which is of type create.js.sprite, just to make it simple. And I say, well, make it a new sprite and use my manager's assets atlas and pass in, I'm looking for the plane sprite. So this is the kind of format that I need to use for my game object. Okay? All right, seems confusing. Let's just do it. Again, my concern, though, I'll be honest with you, is when I look at this format, which is a little bit different than I had before, I see it somewhat differently. I see, you know, plane, cloud, island, and plane, but my plane isn't 65 by 65. It's reporting it at 61 by 49 with a bit of some offsets, right? So we'll see how this works out. I've never used this version of Texture Packer, so we'll see how it works out. Worst case scenario, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go in and modify those values, right? And because I know the width and height of my objects. Okay, let's just accept the fact that it's going to work. So instead of calling it data, we can certainly call this sprite sheet data, right? Or whatever you want to call it. I'm going to leave it a data for our example. Okay, so this is what I need. So now that I've got this as a global object, data, I can access it here. I can access it in my preloader, right? Now in my preloader, I have my manifest, assets is equal to new load queue. That's what my assets are, right? But I want to create something called atlas, right? Atlas is a new spreadsheet. That's what I want to do before I set up my stats. So let's do that. So I'm going to go down here, make some room, and I'm going to say, you know, create sprite or texture atlas. Okay, so this is how it goes. I'm going to say, first thing we need to actually can create it up here as an object, right? So you see I have my manager. Right now I'm going to call this, we haven't made it a manager, but it will be. We're going to call this atlas, right? Which is of type create.js dot sprite sheet. There's our sprite sheet, right? So we're defining what our atlas is. I want it to be available globally. And then I'm going to go in here, just like I did assets. Like assets, if you notice where assets is, they're probably up here. I probably should put it up here with my load queue. Might as well. Just so that way I define it in the same place. just reorganizing where it goes. There's my atlas and my sprite sheet. Now if I go down here, I can start accessing. I say like, well, atlas then, right, is equal to a new create.js.spritesheet. And what it looks for, it gives me IntelliSense, and it tells me, well, I need a data object. Well, I have a data object. It's called data, right? So I'm going to just pass in data, which I can find as a global object. Right, so that defines a new sprite sheet, and it's called Atlas. I'm calling it Atlas, so it's because it's our texture atlas, if you will. Right? Now you can call it whatever you like. Okay, cool. So now to test it, I want to change all of my my objects, right? That means my game objects has to change. So instead of me using ocean, plane, and island, sorry, plane, island, and cloud, I mean, right? We're going to be using our atlas, right? That's what we're going to be using. So how do we do that? Well, it goes back to this game.ts file. Our game.ts file is a bitmap. I got to change this into a sprite. So I'm going to say create.js. I'm going to extend create.js.sprite now instead. That's the first thing I'm changing, my global object. Okay, cool. Well, if you notice, my superclass requires me to put in a different format. I don't just need an image string. I also need the name of my sprite sheet, which is called Atlas. Right? And those are the two things I need now for my sprite. That's it. Everything else is ready to go. I should be able to see everything as normal. Now I want to see what it looks like when we run this thing, because again, it's kind of a weird atlas because it's reporting my plane as being only like 61 by something, and it's really 65 by 65. I'm curious. I want to see how it works. If I have to do some fixes. So first we'll save everything. Just to pre-build. Sometimes I like to do this too. I like to pre-build my solution, right? And what it does, it kind of checks through to make sure there's no errors, and then I run it. It looks okay, but let's refresh, right? Because I don't trust anything that runs like that. Yeah. Yay. Yeah, baby. Huh? Neat. I love it, right? But that's not what I want. Yay. All right, so what happened there? Well, in order for me to use my animation, here's my animation, I gotta send in my sprite sheet, right? And then what the name of the file is called. So example would be, you know, things like plane, island, ocean, that kind of thing, right? So let's do some troubleshooting and see what's going on. So again, my game objects are incoming. I've got my image string that I'm sending into my constructor. Okay, so if I go an example of this, I'm going to stop this and look at my cloud.ts file, right? Well, my superclass is my object, my game object, which I just made, and I'm sending in my image string, my cloud image string. And when I create my cloud, when I instantiate my cloud, I'm passing in cloud, right? That's what it's passing in here, just like we normally would. And to see that, right, where I pass in cloud, I got to go and see where I generate it. So let's go back to my game.ts file and go where I'm starting to kind of generate my clouds for the first time. And let's see where it's being done. Whoa, that's why. Look at assets, get result, ocean. That's not what I want to do. I just want to say ocean. Right? Well, this actually ocean is good. Let's leave that alone. Island. Right? And so I only need that, and I only need, you know, plane. Not get result plane, just plane, because that's what I'm sending in there. Just the name, that's what it's asking for now, just the name of my file, right, that I've kind of made, right? So if I get rid of this stuff, right, then I won't have that big blob, which I just sent there. I'm sending everything, right? And it's the wrong thing. It doesn't know what to take, and that's what's causing that issue. That was one of the changes I had to make that I forgot. Okay, let's run this again. First, I'll build it just to make sure that there's no other errors. Cool, cool. And then I'll run this thing and see if hopefully it'll cause it to run normally. Let's refresh to make sure. Man, it looks okay. Yay. Right? Yay. Huh? So I'm using a sprite sheet now. Yay. To further test this thing, to make sure that I'm not using my old data, I'm going to remove, right, plane, island, and cloud from my preloader. So let's get rid of this because I don't need that anymore. right? So I'm not preloading those anymore. Okay, cool. Let's take a look down here. All right, so there's no more plain island and cloud. Let's try this again. So I'm going to go, I'm going to rerun this thing. Refresh, always refresh.
Yay.
Right? Already looking good. Somehow, Texture Packer had it right.
Yay.
And I'm running a pretty good clip, 60 frames per second, which is really good. Okay, so we've done that conversion now. We've converted to sprites. That's the first piece before we move off. Okay, cool. Well, so this is part one, right? Well, let's see if I can, first of all, hey, I got to upload this to GitHub, right? Because we made some changes. I want you guys to have this stuff. From a Team Explorer perspective, you know, I haven't added it to a Git repository, right? That's kind of something we haven't done, right? So how do I add this in? If I was going to, some people have problems with GitHub all the time, right? I really didn't add this in as something that I was going to do as a repo, right? Remember, I downloaded this from GitHub, right? Because I messed up. And you might mess up somehow like this too, right? So if I right-click on my solution, I can say, add solution to source control. This is really key if you're going to re-add it in, right? When I add my solution to source control, it's going to say, cool, cool. Hey, I like this, Tom. You're doing good, right? Now, when I go to Team Explorer and I go to Home, right, and I go to Changes, right? If you notice, these are all the changes. I'm adding all this stuff on here, right? There's like my plane, my audio. These are all the things I'm doing. This is almost like I'm updating my project. And I also got some untracked files here. These are all my untracked files, right? I'm going to add those in too, right? Okay, so I want to kind of put this as a, I'll say added sprite sheets. Or texture atlas, I'll say texture atlas. So that's what I've done, right? Texture atlas. I'll make a commit. That's my latest commit. But I have to sync it up with GitHub. And this is the challenge. I'm out of sync right now, right? How do I do that? Well, I'm going to go to Home, Unsync Commits, and I need this URI, right? Because I want to sync up to it. So how do I do that? Well, I'm going to go to GitHub, and there's my mail pilot version 11. I don't need that one. Let's just go over here, go to another link here. I got to find my mail pilot, right, for 397. This one. So, me, repositories, and I want to look for, hey, there it is. And what if you notice down here, see this HTTP address right here, HTTPS, GitHub, blah, 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 right? If I copy this to clipboard, and I go over here and I paste it in, right? It gives me everything I need to connect it to GitHub. So it'll connect to this project, right? As a new commit. Now, if everything goes well, if I click publish, we should be good. It says, hey, you cannot publish local branch master to the remote repository origin because a branch with the same name already exists there. You might want to rename your local branch. Try again. Okay, cool. How do I do that? Well, I could call it new branch, right? Because this is our, remember, we lost somehow, whatever, I lost my files, right? And I want to make this new branch. And this is the branch where I'm actually going to start doing stuff with, the state machine and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to make new branch. We're going to call this, instead of, where it is, this is master, the master branch, right? We're going to make a new branch, and we're going to call this something like, instead of master, because that's our local, what our local branch is called, right? We want to call the remote, the new remote branch something else, like, I don't know, Atlas, or we added in our Atlas. Okay, create branch. There's our Atlas. Let's try this out again. So I'm going to go Home, Unsync Commits, right? And if you notice, I want to push Atlas, right? But I don't have any commits, right? So I'm going to go Home, I'm going to Changes, and I'm going to go add a commit. I'm going to say switch branch, so create a new branch. Create a new branch, Atlas. There. Now, here's another problem. I haven't changed anything on this side, so it's not accepting my commit, right? So I can put that in there. I can put it as a comment or something like that. As an example, I could say something like, on branch atlas. Here we go. Commit. Save everything. Now that I got my new commit, and this should work. All right, so now if you notice, I'm not syncing, right? How come? Because if you look at my actions, right, it says incoming commits. I can fetch and pull. Current branch does not have an upstream branch configured. There are no incoming commits for non-tracking branches. Right? That's the issue here. The issue is I don't have a branch that's called Atlas on the upstream branch, right? Okay, so how do I do that? I go to branches, and here I have my Atlas, right? As an example, I can publish my branch, right? Let's do that. Yay, successfully published my branch. Okay, let's see what it looks like on my mail pilot. So here's COMP397 mail pilot. I'm going to refresh. Okay, I've got a couple of branches. Take a look. It says Atlas less than a minute ago. That's a new branch. If I switch now, I can see two branches, Master and Atlas. If I click Atlas, right, now I have all my changes. And if you go in there to Assets, you're going to see that I also have my atlas.json and my atlas.ping. So why am I doing this with you guys? Why have I done this? One, I messed up, which happens, right? But two, the great thing is, let's say you have 2 lines of development. You've worked to a point where you want to stop, almost like a milestone, and you want to get to this other branch. We can call it, the default branch is always called master, but you don't necessarily have to call it master. You can call it whatever you want, like, you know, alpha branch, whatever you want to call it. Then you go to beta branch, and then you can go to final release branch, right? There's many ways of doing this kind of stuff. It's releasing, it's the way you want to structure GitHub. That's totally up to you. So for now, look at the Atlas branch, and you pull that down. If I go back to COMP397, normally it defaults to master, right? Master branch is not the one I want you to look at. What you want to do is you want to go to my Atlas branch, right? My Atlas branch. And by the way, right, you could certainly make one of the branches the default branch if you wanted to do that. Okay. And if I look at settings, let's take a look at this for a second. So here's settings, right? And if I look at things like collaborators, when you guys collaborate with your partners and so on, you're going to add collaborators. I'm going to add in, I could add in whoever I want, right? By going in here and adding the name of the person. So Ali, what's your name? Let's make you a collaborator.
Outside.
On GitHub?
Yeah.
L, spell it.
ALISAIN.
Is that it? Is that you? Well, look, there's a couple of them, right? Which one are you? Is it this one with your funny symbol right here? Is that what it looks like for you? Oh, okay. Give me some. What's your GitHub name? Say it. UGUR. That's it. See how it comes up? So once you do this with collaborators, you add collaborator. If I added you in now, you'd be able to go there and add and change my stuff. So if you're working with a partner, right, this is the way you would do that. You would add a collaborator. Now they have access to changing your code and updating. Now the risk is if you and me are working together. What's your first name again? Ur. So let's say Ur and I, right, are working together on this thing, and he makes a change to my game.ts, and so do I at the same time, right? Which one gets pushed first? Well, depending on the time frame, the timestamp that I get from my commit, if I push first and then you push afterwards, right, it's going to say, oh, there's a problem, there's a conflict. You need to pull. The standard way you guys have to do this from a workflow perspective is do a pull or a fetch first, right? And then when you have the latest fetch, before you start working on your stuff, right, push up. Communicate with your partner as well. Or, here's the other way of doing it, create a new branch that has nothing to do with your partner, and then later on merge the two branches together, right? Where you take both those pieces together, piece parts from one partner and the other, and put them together into a branch. Okay, we're not going to do that right now, but that's one of the ways we do that. Okay, so we've got our branch. Again, I've got my, it looks like it's branch master here, right? And again, if you notice, it looks like it says I can compare and review just about anything, right? I want to compare these two branches. If I wanted to do that, I could certainly do this, right? Compare the two branches. Like compare my base, which is master, with my Atlas branch, right? And if you notice, it says there's nothing to compare, right? Because I don't understand what you're doing. What you want to do is compare one branch with another, right? Kind of stuff, and then you can compare, according to what's been changed. Let's go back. So a couple of other things on GitHub to show you as well, right? So issues and pull requests. Issues we basically use for GitHub to kind of create a new issue. Like for example, Tom, I need, if I go new issue, an example, I haven't created any labels. You can create your own custom labels here on issues to keep track of your project. Like GitHub can be used for project tracking as well, right? There's lots of little really cool things. You can also assign somebody to your to this particular issue. Like for example, one of the issues I have that I'm assigning, right, as an example, is I need to make this asset manager class. So I can put something in there, like need to create asset manager class, right? And again, I have no labels, right? If I want to, I can click there, and I can say this. It's not an enhancement; it's a feature that I gotta kind of add in there, right? So I'm gonna kind of make my own if I want to, right? So call it feature. And if I don't have my labels, like for example, if I want to make my own labels, these are the ones that are basically there. Won't fix. I can make it a question enhancement. Okay, it's an enhancement. There we go. It's an enhancement, right? And I don't have a milestone for this project. I don't have anybody assigned. I can assign myself to it. So I'm assigning me to it. I'm going to assign me as the person who's doing it, right? I need to write this thing. And one of the things I say is currently have. Watch what it does. Currently have assets and texture atlas as part of main game.ts file. Need to move this into its own module. Okay, submit new issue. When I do that, I have this issue, right, that I've submitted. It comes from me. I've flagged it as an enhancement, right? And when I go back to my project, right, now I have an issue. That's right here, right? It actually flags it as something I need to do. So if you want to work and manage your project here on GitHub, you can certainly do that. Again, my master branch isn't the one I want to work with right now. I want to work with my Atlas branch. All right. Let's go back. So I've done this piece. I've got to do more, right? I've got to move this off now into my manager. Here's my assets, and under assets I also have scripts here, and under scripts I have this managers. I need to create a new manager called asset manager, right? So we're going to right click and we're going to go add. I'm going to add a new TypeScript file, and we're going to call this is under the managers folder. We're going to call this assets, right? Okay, cool. Well, remember when we create a new object, right? I'm going to say module, right? It's going to be managers. That's what the module is going to be called, right? And we're going to make an assets class. So we're going to say export class, right? And then an asset class, right? Oops. Okay, so there's our asset class. When I save, it creates this. It creates a, kind of this JavaScript automatically, right? Now my asset class doesn't do anything. I don't have a constructor for the class. I don't have anything for it right now. I need to add a couple of things here. I'm making it a class for a couple of reasons. I could not make it a class, right? but I want to instantiate my assets. And when I do so, when I instantiate my new asset manager class, it does a couple of things, right? One of them is, let me just get rid of this and this. If I go back to my game.ts file, which is here, right? I want to do a couple of things. I want to kind of create this manifest, right? That's the first thing I want to create. I want to also create this data, right? This assets data, right? I want to do this. And when I go assets dot, load queue, because remember assets right now has a lowercase assets, and I also have a lowercase atlas. I want to clean this up so I don't use assets or atlas anymore. I've got to use something else. I've got to use my new class that I'm going to define, right? So I need to do that. And in here, in my preloader, right, where I go assets is equal to new load queue, I'm not going to do that anymore. I want to instantiate a new asset class, right? And when I do that, it'll do all the other stuff. It'll create my plugins. It'll create my create this new event handler. All this stuff is going to be created when I create my assets class. That's what I want to do. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to access my atlas, right? And I'm going to access my assets, right? I'm going to do that, whatever it's going to be called. And this one is going to be called almost my, I don't know what I'm going to call it, my queue or my loader, if you will. That's what this really is. So a little bit of a different change in naming convention. So I'm going to say assets.loader, that's my preloader. Assets.atlas, that's going to be my sprite sheet. That's how it's going to be viewed. Okay, cool. So I want to get all this. So this preload function then, this whole thing here, right? I'm going to call this assets.preload. And when I call assets.preload, it's just going to preload. It's going to do the exact same thing this does, except for my setup stats, which is not part of my assets class. And it's going to do that for every game that I make. Okay? So I need all this stuff here. So I'm going to create another in my assets class, right? I need to make a constructor, right? So I'm going to call this, here's my constructor, right? And my constructor, I'm going to use the constructor notation, right, for this. There it is. And underneath that, I'm going to have a preload function. Here's my preload, right? Okay, here's my preload function for my assets, right? And my preload is going to be called, right, when I call my my class. So as soon as I instantiate my class, I'm going to say this dot preload, right? So I'm going to preload my assets as soon as my class is instantiated. Okay. Go back to game.ts. But I need all this stuff for it to happen. I need all this stuff in here for my assets to load, right? That's the one thing I need. So I'm going to kind of grab all this for a second up to here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my assets. And inside my preloader, my asset preloader in my class, I'm going to paste it. Now this is all good, right? But I got a bit of an issue, right? I need a couple of things here. Assets and Atlas won't work anymore. I've got to have those two things here, up here, as my public property. So here's my public properties, or instance variables, if you will. Right? Inside my public properties, I'm going to need to put in my my assets, right? So I need two things here. I need assets and Atlas right now. I'm going to copy these. Go back over here, paste them. And I don't need to use the var keyword when I make a class, just as a reminder. I don't need to do that. Right? Okay, and I'm not going to call it assets because that makes no sense. I'm going to call this loader in this particular case. So I'm going to rename this to loader. Right? Loader. There's two properties that I have in my asset class. Asset.loader, asset.atlas. Those are the two things that are going to be there, right? So in my assets now, it's going to be this.loader. That's what I want to put in here. So this.loader, right? And I'll do the same thing for here. This.loader, this.loader, this.loader. Okay, cool. All right, I have a manifest that I'm loading and data that I'm loading. Well, I need to have a manifest and data that are inside of my class, right? not inside of my game.ts file, right? So I'm going to go back to my game.ts file, and I'm going to grab this manifest. This is my asset manifest. So I'm going to grab this, go back to my asset class. I need to put that in there as a public property for a second. And I'm not going to use the var keyword because it's going to be part of my class, right? And we're going to use the public access modifier keyword up here to create it as class here. There we go. Public manifest, public loader, public atlas, right? And I'm also going to do the same thing with my public data down here, right? Now, again, I can call it data, I can call it atlas, whatever. And by the way, does it have to be public? Probably not, because this information only has to be within my class. I can hide this stuff so that my only thing that the consumers of my class use, other files or whatever, are only going to be my loader and my atlas. You shouldn't care about how do I make my loader and my atlas, right? So I want to hide this data. So actually I'll make this private. My manifest won't be available outside. And that means these are private properties of my class. And the same thing for my my data. Okay, so private data. So here it is. Take all this information. I'm not deleting it yet because I'm going to show you how I'm going to test it to make sure that it's working. So here's my private. I don't have to make it. I don't have to declare it as variable. Private data. Okay, cool. So I've got my private data. I've got my private manifest, and now I want to use them here instead of manifest, which is global, and data, which is also global. So I'm going to have to say this dot manifest, right, and this dot data to use it. Okay, cool. So now I've kind of created my class. What it looks like on the JavaScript side is like this. It kind of encapsulates the whole thing and makes it all one, right? Okay, so very complex. It looks complex, but really all I'm doing is creating this preloader. And once my preloader is done, right, I'm done. There's nothing for me to do. I'm waiting for my things to complete, and when it completes, I'm going to load init. Now this is the challenge. See this loader on? Now this is where it becomes a little bit crazy, right? I'm saying this dot loader dot on, which is I'm using this is the one thing I'm going to have to take out, this piece here, right? Because I don't know what init is, right? Init is part of my code, my code, right? Now I could leave it in here because init is a global variable right now. Init is a global function that exists in my game.ts file. So theoretically, I could leave this the way it is. Not great form. For now, we're going to do that. We're going to leave it all encapsulated into one big, nice class. In the future, I may want to pass in init into my constructor so that I don't know what the init is. I make a copy of the init in here. Right now, let's leave it as is. All right? Okay, so I know some of this might be foreign to you. You might look at it and go, what the hell is he doing? Right? Okay, so we've done this. We've done my manager. We've done my asset manager. But what do I need to do to add this into my index.html? How do I add this in together? Right? Ali, what do I do?
Reference it by dragging.
I need to do that first, but I also need to get my index. Good for you. I need to use my index.html. Right? Now, if you notice, here's my my game objects, and I have my collision manager down here. Now I need my asset manager to work before everything else. Maybe under my utility folder, but definitely above my game objects. They need to be there. So I need to drag it in the right order. And I think I need to put it right here. So I'm going to get my asset manager and put it here. There's my asset manager. Okay. So there's my manager's asset. I'm going to save it, and now I got to do the same thing when it comes to my reference path. So it's got to go below utility right here in my game.ts file, and I'm going to drag and drop that into here. Okay, so there's my reference. Whew. Okay, now this is where we're going to do a couple of different things here. One, we're going to kill all this stuff. We're going to actually put this in stasis. Let's just do this. We'll say, open up this, right, and grab the end, which I like to do, and then go all the way down to the bottom here and kill this. So this is there I'm not going to erase it because it was a working file before, right? We can always go back and get rid of this. I also need to get rid of a couple of things. Like, you notice assets, all this stuff now is dead, right? And I don't need to do any of this stuff anymore because it's being done in my class. So let's do the same thing to this. So I'm going to go, let's put this all in stasis as well. Right? Again, this is what I'm doing, so I'm testing. So I'm going to go dump up. Okay, cool. Well, when I've done that, that means that down here, I've got a couple of other issues. Right? I got an error down here because I'm using assets.getResult ocean, right? And there is no assets right now, right? Let's leave it as is for now because I may go back there and, you know, do something different here. Okay, it's going to remind me that I need to do something anyway. All right, so here in my preloader now, I'm going to put in my new assets. I'm going to reinstantiate my new assets file. And if you notice here, I've got a couple of other things. I've got rid of this, but I need to create something of a manager, which I'm going to do down here. Now I'm going to actually go into my managers, and before my collision manager, I'm going to create my new atlas. I'm going to say var assets, right, is of type managers dot asset, right? Because I made my new class. That's the first thing. All I'm doing is I'm creating a reference to my assets. There it is. It's the first thing. I haven't instantiated it yet. Okay, the next thing I've got to do is in here, in my preloader, if this all works, right, I've got to instantiate my new assets. So I'm going to say assets, right, is equal to a new managers.asset. And now what it needs is nothing. I just call it like that, right? Okay, now that I've got this, it does all this, right? This is all good. I need to change a bunch of stuff. My objects all need to change because my objects are accessing not my assets anymore. It's my asset manager that gets access, right? That's one. And the other thing is that down here, this doesn't work because my assets get result doesn't do what I need to do. I need to do assets.loader.getResult because loader, if I go to my assets thing, is what's taking place of my load queue now, right? Okay, so some minor changes. So last assets, and to test that, if I was going to wipe this out, I'm just going to get rid of this for a second, right? To show you what it, from a code hinting how it works, I start typing assets.loader. So that's what, if you notice, those are my two public, the public faces of my assets class are atlas, loader, and preload because of the things I did. Those are the three things that I kind of created, right? Atlas, loader, and preload. So I need to do loader.getResult, right? And then inside there, we're going to put ocean because we know that ocean is something that getResult, that the assets loader knows. Okay, cool. Whew. That's one piece. Now, the next pieces. This is the other difficult piece. In my game object class, right? My game object is sending in something called atlas and an image string for my it needs a sprite sheet. Well, atlas itself doesn't exist anymore because I've taken it out. I need to use my assets atlas, right? So to show you this, I need to go, let's put it in assets. So managers, right? Actually, no, that's wrong. I was right the first time. Assets dot atlas is my new object, right? Assets.atlas, right? And I'm sending in my image string. Okay, because that's linked in there too. So I've got this in my objects. It looks like there's no more errors that I can see. I am still getting red here, and I got to see where I'm getting these errors from. So first thing I want to do is kind of build. I'm going to rebuild or clean my solution. Just get rid of this red stuff, and then I want to build it up because I don't know where my errors are coming from. I think it's coming from assets in a second. So let's go to assets for a second and see where the error is. Oh, hey, atlas. I don't know what atlas means. This is the problem. So it's going to be this dot atlas. That's what I'm doing. This dot atlas is equal to create.js sprite sheet data. That's what I need. Definitely need that, right? Because there is no atlas anymore. I've got to use this dot atlas, which is my property, right? Okay, save that. So I've got all my changes. Let's do a pre-build to see how it works. Building everything. My build succeeded. All right, and this is the test to see if everything fails. Let's see if everything's going to crash down on my head, because it still might happen, right? All right, let's refresh.
Yay. 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 Yay.
Looks good, right? Let's make sure that there's not getting any errors. Let me just turn this
Yay.
down.
Yay.
Let me just turn this down here. So again, it looks like she's working here. But let's just go to, just to make sure, I'm going to go to more tools, and I'm going to go to JavaScript Console to see that there's any errors. Because sometimes what it'll do is it'll kick out some errors. Now right now it's not. This is a very good sign. It means like my atlas, my texture atlas, and everything else is working. Right, there we go. Okay, and I'm still running at 60 frames per second, which is a really good sign that things are good. Now I'm going into minuses because I haven't fixed this problem yet, right? But I think, Ali, I've done everything I need to do, you know, for these 2 hours to get the atlas running. And it's part of the thing. I have to, making my own texture atlas and everything else, again, I'm just losing lives like crazy here, is part of the fun. Okay, so to really test this out, so now I got a preliminary running, my function running. To really test this out, and this is the trick now, I want to get rid of all this stuff. I don't need this anymore, right? I get rid of all this, right? And if you notice now, this is really great. My preload function is really small now, right? My preload function, I call my assets into being, right? That's all I do now. It's like really small. Right? So here I'm going to say instantiate asset manager class. There's my asset manager class, right? And I'm never going to call my preloader again. I just do it one time, right? Okay, cool. So I've got that. I've got my init function. Let's see if there's anything else I got to erase. I think I got everything right. So it's really kind of slimmed down, right? I've kind of taken that whole assets and put it into its own file. And this is what I really wanted to do. Okay, cool. So if everything goes well now, I'm going to rerun this thing and rebuild everything. And if I've done everything correctly, I want to stop debugging. Then I should be able to run my mail pilot, and we'll take a short break after this for a bio break for some people who need it, like me. Let's run this thing. Okay, cool. So I know for sure, I got to refresh. It's important to refresh, right? It's cool because now I know it's using my atlas. Here's my atlas, right? To do stuff, right? So it's just kind of cool, right? Now this is a different way that I've written it this time around than compared to last time. Last time I created it as a static class, right? Where I used static objects, almost like a container class. This time I've actually instantiated an object that kicks off the load queue that makes everything work. So this is actually a much better way of doing things. Okay, so I'm good. Now let's update GitHub for those people who are following me on GitHub, right? So let's go to Solution Explorer, yeah. Well, we have to do it because, you're right, that's a good question. We need to do it because, remember, we're going to make each of the games, our game levels in the future, like a capsule, a container, right? So I want them to have access to my asset manager, not inside themselves, but somewhere else. So I create my asset manager once, and I never have to do it again, right? I have one big asset manager that preloads everything for my game, right? And I do it every level. So every time I go to the next level, I preload my level again. I preload my assets. And when I go in there, when I stop everything, I kill all my assets. I kill everything, right? So I kind of erase all those two things. I kill my collisions, I kill my assets, I erase my data, and I clean up my memory, right? That's the whole idea behind it. Okay, so yeah, part of it's for organization, but a really big part, a bigger part, is for management, how I manage my game states. Okay, so I think that's all I want to talk about for this one before we take a break. But I want to do, before I go in there, I was going to kind of go into update this on GitHub. I'm going to go to Team Explorer, and again, if you notice, branch Atlas is the one I want to go to now, right? So I'm going to go to Home, Changes. Again, I'm on the Atlas branch. I want to create Atlas Manager class. Created and deployed Atlas Manager class. I'm going to add these untracked files, right? And I'm going to click Commit. Now when it does that, it commits to my Atlas. I want to go Home, Unsync Commits. I'm going to sync my Atlas branch, right? Sync. So what this does now, if I go back to GitHub, and MailPilot, I've got my master branch, and that's not going to change. But my Atlas branch now, if you notice, it says, 8 commits behind master, right? Because I've done a couple things behind master. If I go into this, and I go into assets, let's take a look. Or sorry, scripts. And if I go to managers, then I'll see that I have an asset manager class, right? Which right here, this is the one we just made. Right? So I know it's there, right? Hey, I also took care of that issue, eh? Like I took care of that issue. I created an issue, right, as an example. Here's my MailPilot. And if you notice, I've got one issue, and I want to take care of this issue, right? So here it is. So this is the enhancements. I need to create an asset manager class. I go in here, as an example, and I want to close this down, right? I want to close my issue. So manager class, Atlas manager class, manager class created. So why am I doing this? Why am I actually creating issues here on GitHub and closing them down? I want to close and comment, right? There it is. It's closed. It's a closed issue now. So if I ever want to go back and check to see if I want to go through and check all my details, I can certainly go into issues, and I can see that if I had any issues before, I could track them. There's not any open issues right now. And anything else I want to go into, I see there's one closed, and I can see that this is one of the things from a planning perspective that I opened, and I made it as an enhancement to the program, and that's what I did. So I can keep track of my files up on GitHub. GitHub is a great little project manager that allows me to do stuff from a project planning perspective, or that kind of thing. And then you can add additional things in there. I really scratching the surface here with what we're doing. Okay, so that's it. Let's go back to this and stop recording. And stop sharing. And hopefully we'll stop everything, right? We're just going to go back in here and then stop the broadcast. Okay, and I'm going to stop